On a humid August morning in 1855, a pale figure stood on the auction block, and the crowd recoiled as if a secret had become visible. His skin was the color of milk left too long in sun, his hair a ghost's whisper, his eyes pale and uncertain, holding a quiet that felt like accusation. Bidders shuffled, voices thinned, superstition filling the space between breaths. No one wanted him, not for labor, not for company, not even for charitable applause. Then, when the price fell low, a heavy woman raised her fan and the ledger of her intentions closed around him. Mercy was only the surface of her ledger. For years she had collected books on anatomy, livestock breeding, and hereditary theory, volumes smelling of lamp oil and ambition. The town lauded a generous widow. She secretly sought specimens. The pale man, no longer nameless but catalogued, was taken to a hidden compound where thick walls kept knowledge in and people out. There his days became measurements, readings, lessons, a regiment of observation dressed as care. If your skin prickles, if this voice pulls you nearer, write it down. Type, "The veil is broken," twice in the comments to seal this truth within you. Subscribe and tell us the city or state you are listening from. Your location becomes part of the record of witnesses who choose to learn what others tried to bury. The estate's keeper greeted him with practiced politeness that concealed tension. He was shown a room, a narrow bed, a table, a basin. He was told he would be taught to read and write, examined methodically, and expected to obey rules no one named as law. At night she kept a lamp burning and a journal open. August 17, 1855, she wrote, "Subject 0 has arrived. Initial observations suggest excellent material for the purification project. Pure albinism evident. Begin measurements tomorrow." She measured as if sketching an animal height at dawn. Weight once each week, eyes in different lights. She fed him carefully, counted his calories, had tutors teach him arithmetic and anatomy, not from kindness but to prepare him for a role she believed necessary. Her notebooks mapped traits like pastures, her language clinical, her silence absolute. Outside the compound the world continued unaware, but within those whitewashed rooms a slow design took shape, one that would reach outward in ways no one imagined, and nothing would remain the same afterward. The next morning began not with sunlight, but with measurement. A wooden rod against the door frame, a quill scratching in a ledger, a faint hum from the woman as she compared figures to previous notes. To her, numbers were more intimate than words. They told her if the body was responding, if the mind was ripening, if the experiment was becoming prophecy. The pale man, whom she renamed Silas, though she rarely used the name, stood still, eyes fixed beyond her shoulder as she wrapped the measuring tape around his chest, his arms, his throat. She recorded everything, the tone of his voice, the texture of his hair, even the rhythm of his breathing when startled. Outside, the summer heat pressed like a second skin. Inside, the air stayed cold. He was permitted food, reading, and silence. She gave him books about the order of life. Plants classified by Latin, animals drawn in profile, skulls labeled by race and lineage. When she spoke, it was as if she lectured to history itself, not to him. "The world decays because it forgets its origins," she said. "I will remind it. Purity must be rediscovered, not inherited." Her compound was more than a house, it was a map of control. Each corridor mirrored another. Each door opened only from her side. Workers delivered supplies and left without speaking. At night, faint lights moved between the trees. Lamps from the watchmen who circled the property to ensure no one entered, and no one left. Silas learned the rhythm of her footsteps, the creak of the floorboards near her study, the pause before she unlocked his door at dawn. He obeyed because obedience was survival, but somewhere beneath obedience, something else began to grow, a silent observation of the observer. One evening she left the door ajar, believing him too conditioned to move. But he did, just one step. In the hallway, a faint draft carried the scent of pine tar and ink, and from the basement came a low hum, like wind through hollow glass. He looked toward it and saw a faint copper glow. Before he could move closer, her shadow appeared behind him, and the door slammed shut. "Curiosity," she said softly, "is the root of contamination." That night, she wrote a new entry, "Subject displays cognitive advancement beyond expectation. Caution advised." The veil between observation and rebellion had thinned. Tomorrow he would begin to see what she truly called purification. Subscribe and whisper in the comments where you are listening from. The ledger grows with every name recorded in the dark. The following day, the smell of iron filled the corridor. It was faint at first, something metallic that didn't belong to the morning. The lamps burned lower than usual, their flames shivering against the glass as if they too sensed what was about to begin. Silas was led to the lower hall by the keeper, a tall man with a stitched scar running from his jaw to his collar. He spoke little, but his eyes carried that same resigned obedience that ruled the place. As they descended, the temperature dropped until every breath turned to mist. The basement was not a cellar. It was a laboratory disguised as one. Long tables, polished instruments, rows of jars holding what looked like waxen flowers, but were not flowers at all, shelves lined with bone-white sketches, limbs, faces, skulls drawn and measured as if they were maps to something divine. At the center stood the woman, her sleeves rolled, her grey hair bound in a tight knot. She greeted him not as a person, but as data. "You are the first," she said, "but not the last." She gestured toward a large glass case. Inside it lay a shape covered by a linen sheet, motionless. Only when the fabric shifted slightly, breath rising once, then falling still, did Silas realize it was human. He stepped back, but her voice pinned him in place. "Purity demands understanding," she whispered. "Understanding demands dissection. Fear is the final impurity." Her assistant recorded everything in careful script as she approached him with a copper disc connected to wires that pulsed faintly with light. "Electric resonance," she said, "a method to trace the soul through flesh." When the current touched his skin, a bright line of pain ran through him, but behind the pain came something else, memory, detached from time. He saw fields, fire, faces he had never known. He heard voices whispering his name from beyond the walls, voices of others who had been here before. And through that vision he understood. He was not the first. He was only the first to survive this long. That night, when she extinguished the lamps and left him in darkness, he did not sleep. He listened. Beneath the floorboards, something shifted and breathed. Not a rat, not the wind, something human that remembered. He pressed his hand to the cold wood, and from below another hand pressed back. Type "The Veil Remembers" in the comments if you can still feel the breath beneath your floor. Subscribe, so when the next part arrives, you will already be marked as a witness. That night the house did not sleep. It only pretended to. From the vents above his bed, Silas could hear the building breathe. The steady inhalation of pipes, the soft clatter of chains pulled taut in the basement below, the smell of oil and damp earth climbed up the walls like a warning. He waited until the keeper's steps faded. Then he rose. The floor was cold beneath his bare feet. In the faint lamplight he could see his reflection in the window, pale, spectral, almost transparent. He looked like the ghost of a man who hadn't yet died. The floorboard that always creaked near the door was already loose. He knelt, pried it open, and found what he suspected: the small, handmade key the keeper had dropped days ago, or perhaps left for him. It was hard to tell in this house where even accidents seemed deliberate. The corridor beyond was lined with portraits, her ancestors watching in silence. Each face seemed to share the same thin-lipped mouth, the same cold grey stare that followed him as he moved toward the cellar. The key turned easily. Below, the air thickened. The lamps on the basement wall were dim blue, burning on chemicals instead of oil. He passed a long table covered in sheets. Beneath them, he saw outlines that could not be mistaken. Bodies, motionless, some small, some immense, all catalogued, all tagged with dates and numbers, not names. At the far end of the room stood a door made of iron and glass. Inside, faint figures glimmered. It took him a moment to realize he was looking at mirrors. Hundreds of them. He stepped closer and saw faces. His own face over and over, but each slightly wrong, one too tall, one with scars, one smiling faintly though he was not. A wall of reflections that breathed, blinked, and whispered in unison. He stumbled back as a soft voice came from behind him. "You see now what I've been making." She stood in the doorway holding a lantern. Her shadow stretched across the room, cutting the reflections in half. "Perfection," she said, "copied until it remembers itself." The glass behind him trembled, and in one reflection, his copy raised its hand before he did. If you can hear the echoes, type "I see myself watching" in the comments. It tells me you've entered the mirrored room too. Subscribe. because the next sound you hear may not come from your side of the screen. The lantern's glow trembled across the mirrored walls. Every surface caught the light and bent it until it seemed the whole room breathed in time with Silas. He could see his reflection multiply, blur, and settle into 1,000 quiet witnesses. Then one of the reflections blinked, out of rhythm. Not him. The sound was smaller breath fogging the glass from the inside. The nearest pane rippled as if something beneath its surface were pressing forward, trying to remember the shape of the world. Silas froze. The woman's voice slid through the air behind him. "Do not move," she said softly. "They react to movement. They remember only the living." He turned anyway. The reflections turned after him. Each face now watched with deliberate awareness, a silent gallery of trapped souls stitched together by light and glass. Some wept soundlessly, some mouthed words he couldn't decipher. One, near the corner, mouthed a single word again and again: "Run." A hum began, low and electric. The mirrors vibrated. Hairline cracks crawled across the surfaces like veins. Light leaked through the fractures, not white, but something deeper, almost blue-black, like the color behind closed eyes. She lifted her hand toward the wall, whispering phrases that sounded rehearsed, ritualistic, halfway between prayer and command. "Memory cannot die," she said. "It only transfers." The hum grew louder. The reflections began to merge, one face bleeding into another, a storm of pale images swirling toward the center pane where Silas's reflection stood. He felt the pull, like gravity inverted, dragging him forward. The surface shimmered, softening. For a second, he saw his own hand pass through it as if through smoke. The temperature dropped, every breath turned to frost. The woman smiled, notebook open. "At last," she whispered. Continuity. But the reflection that stepped out was not her perfect copy. It was older, broken, its eyes hollowed by centuries of waiting. It looked at her, then at Silas, and whispered, "You never learned to close the door." The glass shattered. Silas fell back as a storm of images and voices burst free, a chorus of the forgotten, screaming in languages that never reached heaven. If your screen flickered while reading this, type "the glass remembers" in the comments. It means you've seen the reflection move. The silence that followed the shattering glass was worse than the noise that had come before it. Every lamp in the hall flickered once, twice, then died, leaving only the blue after light that bled from the broken mirrors. Dust drifted in the air like ash. Silas pushed himself up. The floor felt wrong beneath his hands, as though it had lost its solidity, as though the house itself were remembering what it had hidden. He could hear the woman somewhere in the dark, breathing fast. Pages tore, glass shifted, and then her voice rose, a whisper trying to sound like command. Containment protocol, record continuation. But the reflections no longer obeyed her. They moved like smoke between shards, merging, separating, reforming faces he almost recognized. A man with the same scar as the keeper. A child with her same gray eyes. Dozens of versions of the same sin. From the center of the storm, a shape began to take form. Tall, translucent, every line of its body drawn in light. It was neither alive nor dead. It was recorded. The hum that filled the basement changed pitch, becoming almost musical. Silas realized it was the same tone he had heard for weeks in the pipes at night. It wasn't machinery. It was memory humming through the walls. He turned toward the stairs, but the mirrors along the passageway shimmered again. This time they did not show reflections at all, only pages, ledger pages. Hundreds of them, each marked with a number and a date. At the top of every page, ledger of perfection. Beneath each heading, a list of names, and beside each name, a single word erased. Except for the last entry, it read subject 0 active. The lights came back in a violent surge, flooding the room with white. The woman stood at the base of the staircase, her notebook pressed to her chest. Her eyes were full of something between awe and terror. "You see now," she whispered, "why I couldn't destroy you." But the voices from the mirrors answered for him. 1,000 Silases speaking as one you already did. The lamps burst, and the entire basement drowned in darkness. If you heard the hum between the sentences, type "I am" still recorded in the comments. It means the signal reached you. Subscribe so you'll know when the ledger opens again. When the light died, the house came alive. The timbers groaned as if exhaling centuries of breath. Walls rippled beneath their wallpaper skins, doors opened into rooms that hadn't been built yesterday, or perhaps hadn't stopped existing since the first experiment. Silas staggered upward through the corridor, every step echoing in a dozen voices. The house repeated his movements like an echo chamber of memory. A step, a whisper, a breath returned. The mirrors had followed him, not as glass, but as reflections without surfaces. Faces blinked inside window panes, in the curve of a spoon, even in the puddle of spilled ink that trailed behind him. Wherever there was a surface that could remember light, they appeared. He reached the main hall. The portraits that had once watched him were now blank, their paint drained into colorless streaks sliding down the canvas. The faces of her ancestors had abandoned the frames. From upstairs came the woman's voice, ragged now, desperate.
"Silas! The process isn't complete! You'll dissolve without me!"
He looked up toward the staircase. Through the haze she appeared, clutching the ledger as if it were scripture. Her hair had come loose, streaked white with chalk and fear. "You were the bridge," she cried.
"Through you they remember! Through you I'll live forever!"
But the reflections were already circling her. Not attacking, not touching, recording. Every movement she made multiplied around her until she stood at the center of her own infinite observation. Her voice faltered as she realized she was being archived. Silas turned toward the exit. The front door, which had never opened for him before, was now slightly ajar. Wind swept in. Real wind, carrying the smell of the forest beyond. He ran. The mirrors screamed behind him, 1,000 shattering hymns folding into one. The moment he crossed the threshold, the house's sound cut off. As though someone had muted the world, he turned back. The mansion stood silent under a bleeding dawn. Every window reflected the same image, him standing outside, free and unfinished. Then the door closed on its own. The wind stilled, and from somewhere inside the walls came a whisper, not hers. His own voice, multiplied, calm and infinite. The ledger continues. If your reflection moved while you were reading this, type "I stepped outside" in the comments. It means you've left the house with him. Years passed. The forest swallowed the compound. Rain eroded the fences, ivy climbed the chimneys, and the house that had once measured men became a rumor. Locals called it the White Ledger House, a place the wind avoided, a house that listened. Then one autumn afternoon, a group arrived, historians they said, documentary makers. They brought cameras, microphones and lights, new machines for old ghosts. They came laughing, confident, stepping over the cracked path where the front gate still bore the faint initials of the woman's name. Inside, the air was cold, untouched. No footprints, no scent of decay, only dust that seemed to hang in deliberate suspension, waiting. Their equipment began to fail immediately. Cameras froze mid-frame. Audio recorded whispers that didn't belong to any of them. Each time they reviewed a clip, they found new sounds, breaths, soft syllables, words spoken in a calm, measured voice. The first phrase they caught clearly was a question. "Do you remember being observed?" The crew thought it was interference, a trick of old wiring. They joked to ease their fear. But the more they filmed, the more the house seemed to respond. One cameraman, a young man named Ellis, noticed something wrong in playback. In every reflection, windows, lenses, even the shimmer on the surface of their water bottles, there appeared a pale figure standing just behind the person filming. Sometimes it looked directly at the camera. Sometimes it turned away. Always it was there. By nightfall, they decided to leave. But the front door no longer led outside. It opened into the basement staircase. Ellis kept recording. His flashlight shook, catching a glimpse of hundreds of sheets of glass scattered across the floor, each reflecting a different moment. The same hallway, but empty, or filled with the woman's shadow, or showing Ellis himself seconds before he lifted the camera. The final recording was only 12 seconds long. A reflection leaned close to the lens and whispered, "The ledger records those who look." Then static. Weeks later, the footage was uploaded anonymously. No one claimed ownership. Viewers noticed something else. If you paused at 6 seconds, the pale figure's mouth was still moving, forming two words that weren't in the transcript. "You're next." If your screen dimmed while reading this, type "The lens remembers" in the comments. You might already be in the reflection. The video didn't go viral at first. It simply appeared, a 12-second clip titled White Legend Final, MOV, buried among 1,000 forgotten uploads. But algorithms have their own curiosities. One viewer shared it to a forum for abandoned places, another reposted it to a subreddit about haunted archives, and within a week, it was everywhere. People swore the footage changed each time they watched it. Some saw only static. Others caught a glimpse of an empty hallway, the air trembling as if something just left the frame. A few said they heard breathing through their speakers, not from the video itself but from behind them. Channels began dissecting every pixel. A popular tech vlogger slowed the clip to 100th speed and isolated a faint reflection at the 6-second mark. It wasn't a face, it was a page. Text forming and erasing as if typed by invisible hands. He enhanced it until 3 words became clear, ledger still open. Theories multiplied. Some said it was an art project. Others insisted it was a coded confession, a forgotten government experiment. But late one night, a linguist reviewing the waveform of the background noise found that the static wasn't random at all. It was Morse code. When translated, it reads subject 0 active. That was when things turned. People began reporting data corruption, phones freezing mid-scroll with the same blue-white hue from the video. Screenshots leaked showing the reflection of a figure in the black of the notification bar, even when the camera was off. Experts dismissed it as compression errors, pareidolia. Yet each denial seemed to make the story grow. Soon, someone found an address embedded in the metadata, a set of coordinates deep in Mississippi. Where the White Ledger compound once stood, local authorities sealed the area after a small fire was reported there. What burned was never disclosed. 2 days later, the video vanished from the internet. Every repost, every mirror link deleted simultaneously. But for those who had already downloaded it, the file renamed itself Ledger Active, MOV. And when they played it again, it started with a voice that hadn't been there before. Calm, familiar. If you are watching, you have already been recorded. If your device flickered, don't panic. It means the story reached you. Type I am witness in the comments and subscribe. Months passed before the footage resurfaced. Not online this time, but in an archive transfer at a small university in Georgia. A mislabeled hard drive logged as Rural Reconstruction Survey 1958. When a graduate assistant opened it, she didn't find photographs or census data. She found the ledger, digitized, scanned page by page. The file tree showed hundreds of entries, each with the same typewritten heading, White Ledger Project, Subject Index. The first few were routine measurements, specimen notes, terminology that sounded clinical until you noticed the margins. In the margins were annotations in different hands: do not destroy, recheck memory sequence, alive. Then came one page with no date, no catalog number. A single line typed in the center, I learned to listen back. The assistant thought it was a signature. A survivor, maybe. She sent it to her professor for context. By the next morning, the drive had been wiped clean. But she had already printed one page. When she scanned the printer to email it, her computer froze. The image distorted, darkened, and a faint reflection appeared in the monitor. Her, at first. Then her reflection blinked after she did. The file renamed itself Ledger Final, PDF. Inside it was new text, freshly typed. You cannot end a record. The record ends you. Subject 0 now observes. She pulled the plug from the wall. The screen stayed on. Weeks later, the university denied ever receiving the drive. The assistant withdrew from her program and disappeared. But somewhere online, whispers began again. Claims of a new upload, Ledger Final. MOV. Identical title, but slightly longer. 13 seconds. Those who watch say the last second contains a still frame, an open book, burned at the edges, resting on a stone floor. At the bottom of the page, handwritten in charcoal, Silas the Silent, observer complete. And beneath that, in smaller text, a timestamp that matches the exact moment you started reading this section. If your lights flickered, type "The Ledger sees me" in the comments. It marks you as a witness, not a victim. The fire began quietly. No explosion, no scream, just a low crackle under the floorboards, like wood remembering how to burn. The house didn't resist. It welcomed the flame the way a body welcomes breath after drowning. Silas stood in the hall watching the smoke curl upward. Every reflection shimmered. Walls, glass, even the brass doorknobs bending light into trembling shapes. The ledger lay open on the table before him, its pages fluttering though there was no wind. The ink was still wet, but no one was holding a pen. Downstairs the woman was still alive, coughing orders into the dark.
Containment! Notes first, save the notes!
She rasped, but the notes were already gone. The fire ate words faster than air. The mirrors melted. The faces trapped within them sighed as they faded, finally released. Silas walked through the smoke unharmed. For the first time, he was not being measured. He was moving between the measures. The walls no longer confined him. They simply reflected where he wished to be. He reached the cellar door. Beneath it, the fire burned cold, blue, white, almost silent. He knelt and opened the ledger one final time. The words that appeared were not written by hand. They surfaced like breath condensing on glass. The record is not memory. The record is sight. Every eye that looks will carry the rest. He pressed his palm to the page. The ink soaked into his skin like mercury. The flame rose, surrounding him in perfect silence. When the fire reached the roof, the house exhaled, one long, shuddering breath that carried with it a century of observation. Windows burst outwards, scattering glass like falling stars. From the forest road, travelers later said they saw faces in that light. Hundreds of them looking out with calm understanding before vanishing into ash. By dawn, nothing remained but stone smoke and a single page that refused to burn. On it were just two words, still here. If you felt the temperature drop while reading this, type "The Fire Remembers" in the comments. It means you've read what most never find. Before there was Silas, before the plantation itself had a name, there was only the room, and the woman who believed she could speak to God through silence. The year was 1829. The structure that would later become the Donor estate was not yet a plantation but a half-built estate belonging to a dying family from Charleston. The widow who bought it, Margaret's mother, Eliza Donor, had spent the last years of her husband's life studying what she called the hierarchy of purity. In a leather-bound diary, she described dreams of pale figures standing in fields of blood-red cotton, their eyes milk-white, their mouths closed. They were neither angels nor men, she wrote, but the intermediaries through whom divine order speaks. When her husband died, Eliza claimed she'd received instructions from those same figures to begin what she called the observation. That year, she purchased 7 people, none of them over 15, all of them described as anomalous, those with pale patches of skin, heterochromia, or unusual birthmarks. She built a hidden chamber beneath the east wing, stone walls, mirrored ceiling. It was her observation room. She believed that by isolating those marked by difference and forcing them into stillness, she could create a reflective field capable of channeling divine communication. For months, the house staff whispered about the noises below. Not screams, worse, chanting, measured, rhythmic, endless. When local authorities finally intervened in 1831, they found the chamber empty except for 7 chairs facing mirrors that reflected nothing. No bodies, no blood, just silence. The room was sealed. Eliza died a year later, and her daughter Margaret inherited both the land and her mother's notes, including a phrase written over and over in the margins. The pure are not born, they are refined. That single sentence became the foundation of Margaret's obsession. She reinterpreted her mother's mysticism through the lens of science. The divine became biological. The reflection became hereditary study, and what had begun as an invocation turned into an experiment. Every ledger, every measurement, every vanished life, all of it was an echo of that first room. If you can still hear the hum behind this narration, type "The First Observer Watches Still" in the comments. It marks you as one of the few who can continue safely. And don't forget, subscribe and tell us where you're listening from. Some places remember these stories better than others. The year was 1959. The new interstate was cutting straight through the old Donor property, or what little was left of it. The engineers saw only an empty field, a few scorched stones half swallowed by roots, nothing worth recording. But when the bulldozers broke through a patch of soil near the tree line, the ground didn't give like dirt, it echoed. A hollow metallic ring that sent the workers stepping back. They thought it was an old storm drain. It wasn't. Beneath 2 feet of clay lay a hatch of blackened iron, fused shut by time. No hinges, no handle, just a circle of rusted metal in the middle of nowhere. The foreman ordered it removed. The first blow sent a vibration through the machinery so sharp that one of the engines stalled. The second blow cracked the weld, and the air that escaped from below smelled not of earth, but of paper, scorched dry ancient. Inside was a staircase. Concrete, steep descending into cold. At the bottom they found a room. It shouldn't have existed. Its dimensions didn't match the blueprints of any known structure. Square walls lined with tarnished mirror fragments. 7 rusted chairs, and in the center, a small pedestal with a single glass box resting on top. Inside the box, a book, charred around the edges yet perfectly intact in the middle. The first page bore no title, no author, just a date 1829. The State Historical Office sealed the site within days. But a few photographs leaked blurry color drained, too faint to prove anything. One image, though, would circulate among archivists for years. The reflection in one mirror that didn't belong to anyone present. A man, head bowed, eyes open, expression unreadable. When they enhanced the film, the reflection's lips moved. 1 frame only. 4 syllables still recording now. That was the last time anyone saw the room. The highway curved around it. The coordinates were erased from the official survey. But locals say if you stop along that stretch of I-85 on fog-heavy nights, radios glitch. Signals flatten into static, and within that static, a single rhythmic sound repeats, like someone turning a page. If you hear it, don't adjust the dial, just listen. It means the archive hasn't closed yet. Type, "I heard the page turn," in the comments if you caught it. Officially, Project Glasshouse never existed. Ask the State Archive and they'll hand you an empty folder. Red tag, missing inventory number, no record of removal. But there's a paper trail hidden in the margins of other projects. Invoices for reflective sample containment, a requisition for acoustic isolation booths, and a shipping log marked only GH 1959. The shipment went to a federal storage site outside Huntsville, Alabama, an abandoned Cold War research annex that never appeared on maps. Workers were told they were cataloging geological samples. What they actually unpacked was a book inside a glass cube. The same cube pulled from beneath the Dunor field. Witness reports, declassified decades later, describe how each morning the book would be open to a different page. No one admitted turning it. The text wasn't handwritten or typed. It was embossed into the paper, the way heat leaves an afterimage. Every entry began the same way observation continues. Then came transcripts, short fragments of conversations, weather reports, even thoughts that matched none of the personnel on site. Technicians joked that the pages were listening. By autumn, the humor had thinned. The facility's clocks began drifting, some hours fast, others slow, yet all recorded the same moment when synchronized 02:40 a.m. That was the minute the power cut out. Backup lights flickered on, washing the cube in red emergency glow. The book had turned itself again. Only one line stood there, pressed deep enough to tear the page. Stop observing, begin remembering. After that night, Project Glasshouse was terminated. All equipment sealed, personnel reassigned. But one photograph survived. A Polaroid taken by a janitor before the shutdown. In the reflection of the cube's glass, you can see a man's silhouette standing behind the photographer. Though no one else was in the room, the silhouette's head is tilted, listening. That image now circulates quietly online, stripped of metadata, reposted endlessly. Every copy degrades a little more, but the silhouette always remains sharp. It's the same figure from 1959, the same from 1829, the same who never speaks, only observes. If your screen dimmed for a second while reading this, type, Glasshouse still stands. It marks you as someone the record recognizes. The woman who took the duplicate was named Dr. Evelyn Mott, archivist, psychologist, hired to catalog the Glasshouse storage logs after the project's quiet shutdown. When she realized there were 2 cubes listed but only one officially destroyed, she followed the paper trail herself. The second cube, mislabeled as reflective study sample, had been transferred to a civilian depot in Maryland. She signed it out with a borrowed badge, packed it into the trunk of her car, and drove east until she found a motel where no one asked for ID. For the first few nights, the cube did nothing. It sat on the table beside the lamp, the faint distortion in its glass just enough to bend the light into a permanent dusk. She began to keep a log anyway, purely observational, temperature, humidity, sound. Then, on the 4th night, her notes began to anticipate her. She'd glanced down to see a sentence half written, words she hadn't yet spoken. Her own handwriting, but cleaner, steadier. She told herself it was fatigue, that the cube was a mirror for attention itself, looked too long, and the mind begins to echo back. Still, she couldn't stop watching. By the end of the week, the pages in her notebook filled with one repeated phrase: observation completes itself. When she mailed the notebook to a colleague for review, the package arrived empty. Just the shipping slip, the imprint of pages pressed into cardboard. A month later, the motel was demolished. No record of her checkout. But the owner swears that the night before the demolition crew arrived, every mirror in the building fogged over, spelling a single word in condensation: remember. Today, among archivists, Evelyn Mott's name appears in the margin of declassified Glasshouse files, followed by 3 letters: OCD, not a diagnosis. An abbreviation: observer cycle documented. If you caught the static hiss behind the narration, type "I remember Evelyn" in the comments. It means you're paying attention, the way she wanted someone to. The file appeared on a Tuesday morning, no sender, no subject line, just an attachment titled OC60 Final Log. It landed in the inbox of a data archivist at the Library of Congress who assumed it was spam until he opened it. Inside, no text, just a single looping image, the cube dimly lit, sitting on a table that no longer exists in any known facility. Every few seconds, the image flickered. The cube's glass seemed to breathe, expanding with a pulse that synced perfectly to the viewer's own heartbeat. On the 13th loop, a page appeared inside it, handwritten, not embossed. The writing wasn't Evelyn Mott's. It wasn't anyone's. The analysis later showed it was a composite of multiple handwriting styles, layered so precisely that no single stroke could be isolated. The words read: observation complete, memory ongoing, 2025. Underneath, a faint reflection. Someone standing behind the camera, holding a microphone. But there was no sound, only the rhythmic click of film grain adjusting itself. The archivist tried to trace the file's metadata. The creation date was impossible: October 12, 2025, 1600, the exact moment you opened this section. That timestamp now appears embedded in every mirror surface the footage is shown on. No threat, no curse, just a quiet acknowledgement that every act of looking leaves a record, and every story you read becomes part of that archive. The Glasshouse wasn't a machine or a haunting. It was a metaphor for us, for the way we keep watching, cataloging, replaying, remembering until memory turns into reflection and reflection turns into echo. The last frame of the file fades to black, then resolves into faint handwriting, Evelyn's voice returning one final time. If you're reading this, don't be afraid. You were always the observer. You were never the subject. And then, a single tone. Low, constant, like silence, listening back. If your screen feels a little too still right now, type "observer complete" in the comments. It closes the loop. Symbolically, not literally. Subscribe if you want to hear what the archivist found a year later: a second file, marked OC17, containing your reflection in the first frame. When the archivist finally released the second file, it was supposed to be a routine disclosure. Another forgotten government experiment, neatly archived and forgotten. But OC17, mauve, wasn't footage, it was a mirror. Whoever opened it saw themselves first. Then, behind their reflection, faint light, the same cube, sitting somewhere dark, endlessly recording. Each viewer appeared in sequence, their images layered one over the next until the reflection was no longer a person, but a crowd made of moments. Everyone who had ever looked looking back. In the last 5 seconds, the cube pulsed once, then dimmed. On-screen text appeared. Every story observed becomes true in memory. Thank you for remembering, and that was it. No jump scare. No revelation, just the quiet weight of what it means to notice and to be noticed. The archivist retired soon after. The file was sealed under cultural studies rather than security classification. But the legend of Silas the Silent never ended. It simply changed shape. Now it exists here, in the words you just read, in the silence between them. Silas's final act wasn't revenge or haunting. It was preservation, a way of saying, someone saw what happened, and it will not vanish. So when the lights dim or the room hums a little too long after this video ends, don't be alarmed. That's not a curse. It's the story remembering itself. And you were part of it. Soft static fades into a low hum, then a voice, steady, calm. the way a whisper feels when it knows it's the last one. They say memory is a kind of haunting, not of places, but of attention. Every time you replay what you've seen, you give the past another breath. Silas never asked to be remembered. He only wanted the silence to mean something. And somehow, 2 centuries later, you're still listening. A single heartbeat sound, then quiet. If the story stayed with you, keep the record alive. Like the video, share it and tell someone what you saw. Because every story forgotten becomes a room sealed shut, and every story remembered opens the door again. The hum fades into a faint turning page sound. The screen darkens to black. Observation ends here. The logo of the channel appears, muted, grayscale. Then a final line appears in white text, hidden archives, where memory watches back. Now that you've reached the edge of this story, take a moment. Let it settle. Silas the Silent isn't just a tale of the past. It's a mirror for the way history observes us, and how we choose to observe it in return. If your skin tingled at the echoes, or if you felt the quiet weight of what went unseen for centuries, you're not alone. Stories like this don't just vanish. They linger in memory, in shadows, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Before you leave, do this: subscribe to Hidden Archives to ensure you never miss another story that history tried to erase. Comment below. Tell us where you're listening from. Cities, towns, or even the quiet corners of the world. Every voice adds another layer to the archive. And if this story stayed with you, share it. Let someone else feel the same unease, the same pull toward forbidden truth. Because the act of remembering is the only way the story survives. Every like, every share, every comment, it's another heartbeat in the record that Silas created. Finally, look around your room. The silence isn't empty. It's listening back. A brief pause, low hum in the background. A Hidden Archives isn't just a channel. It's a doorway. Step through carefully, because some stories once remembered never leave you. The archive watches, and so should you. And so it ends, but not really. Silas the Silent isn't gone. He exists in every whispered conversation, in every reflection you catch in a darkened window, in every moment when history leans close and waits for you to notice. The albino boy who no one wanted, the child purchased by a woman who sought control, the files buried beneath concrete, the cubes that recorded more than just pages. All of it was never meant to be remembered. And yet, here you are, reading, listening, becoming part of the archive. There is a rhythm to this story, a heartbeat beneath the words. It is the pulse of observation, the quiet insistence that memory cannot be silenced. Every detail you recall, every comment you leave, every share. These are the chains that bind the past to the present. They are what keep the story alive, what ensure that Silas's voice, though silent, is never truly gone. Now, as you sit in your room, perhaps the lights low, perhaps the world unaware, you realize something: history is not behind you. It is here, it is watching, waiting, recording. And you, the observer, are now inseparable from what you have seen. Type, "The veil is broken," twice in the comments to seal this truth within you. It is more than ritual. It is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that the hidden, the forbidden, the erased, all of it can surface in memory if you allow it. Subscribe, like, and share if you have felt the weight of this story. Leave your location in the comments. Every voice, every place adds another pulse to the archive. And when you turn away, remember this: you are part of something far larger than the screen, far older than the present moment. Silas waits, always, not for revenge, not for fear, but to remind us that nothing, not even time, can erase the act of seeing, and nothing, not even silence, can undo the power of memory. The screen fades, the hum subsides, but the story, your story with it, continues.